Good evening. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here. Many of you are celebrating Thanksgiving. Some of you are celebrating Indigenous People Day. However, you're spending today, welcome and good evening to all of you. Yes, this is live. I am in front of you right now, in front of you in 3K, 4K, no, 4, it's no 4, 3K, 4K, or 1080p, whichever you're watching. But just let you guys know the Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms. So go ahead and subscribe to me there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. So you can see me on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays as well. And if you have not already, you can go into my Substack for any time you guys are aware of live streams, clips, or any type of articles I may be writing. You guys go to jaybefaunt.substack.com so you guys are aware. And just as an aside, if you guys have not already, you guys can go ahead and give the stream a like as well. Just to let you guys know, I also have merch on Bonfire, so you guys can go to my merch store on Bonfire if you would like to as well. So, boy, oh boy, it's been a journey, and it's been an exciting, it's been a enlightening, and it's been a humbling journey to go through this book. And I've learned a lot from Miss Assata Shakur. This is going to be the final reading that I do for this book. And I honestly am at a point right now, I'm just like, man, I can't believe, I got through this. But it was such a good analysis from a Black woman who is anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist. And I got to say, I am thoroughly impressed, and I am just happy that I was able to glean some of the knowledge from her. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm doing it on this day. And I'm doing this live is because I wanted to make sure that I got this in live stream as well as on a day where a lot of people are off, right? And they'll be able to watch. So we'll be starting there. As you know, always whenever I do a live stream, I always want to make sure that I say hello to everybody that's in the chat really quick. So I'll be doing that now, and then we'll get into the reading. But it's bittersweet, I gotta say. So we have Adam in. He's saying, Adam Charlton says, hey, good to see you in the chat. We got Janice Anderson coming in saying, happy holiday, everyone, whatever you celebrate or not. Thank you so very much to you, Janice. Good to see you in the chat as well. And I hope you guys have had a beautiful day. It was beautiful outside today. I love cool weather, and it's one of my favorite things. So I am just happy to be able to do it. Also, something really pleasant happened earlier today. I was with my mom, and we were looking up an old family friend that I haven't heard from in years. I haven't heard from this lady since I was 6 years old. So that's 33 years I haven't heard from her. And so we actually got back in contact with each other. And so I'm excited about that because, when you see somebody you haven't seen in years, it's great. So I just wanted to say that, but good. And we have Dwayne in the chats, good to see you, Dwayne, waving at us. Nice to have you here in the chat. So let's get to the reading because I want to make sure I get to this. Plus, I want to be done within an hour so it doesn't go on too long. But we're going to be starting on chapter 20 of Assata Shakur's autobiography. So we'll be reading chapter 20, 21, as well as the postscript. But this will be starting on page 257. We'll be starting there. And so we will be finishing this book up. So let's get into it, guys. My mother brings my daughter to see me at the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey, where I had been sent from Alderson. I am delirious. She looks so tall. I run up to kiss her. She barely responds. She's distant and standoffish. Pangs of guilt and sorrow fill my chest. I can see that my child is suffering. Is it stupid to ask what is wrong? It is stupid to ask what is wrong. I'm sorry. She is 4 years old, and except for these pitiful little visits, although my mother has brought her to see me every week, wherever I am, with the exception of the time I was in Alderson, she has never been with her mother. I can feel something welling up in my baby. I look at my mother, my face a question mark. My mother is suffering too. I try to play. I make my arms into elephant trunks, stalking around the visiting room jungle. It does not work. My daughter refuses to play baby elephant or tiger or anything. She looks at me like I'm the buffoon I must look like. I try the choo-choo train routine and the la 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 song, but she's not amused. I try talking to her, but she is puffed up and sullen. I go over and try to hug her. In a hot second, she's all over me. All I can feel is the little 4-year-old fists banging away at me. Every bit of her force is in those punches. They really hurt. I let her hit me until she's tired. It's all right, I tell her. Let it all out. She's standing in front of me, her face contorted with anger, looking spent. She backs away and leans against the wall. It's okay, I tell her. Mommy understands. You're not my mother, she screams, the tears rolling down her face. You're not my mother, and I hate you. I feel like crying too. I know she's confused about who I am. She calls me Mommy Assata, and she calls my mother Mommy. I try to pick her up. She knocks my hands away. You can get out of here if you want to, she screams. You just don't want to. No, I can't, I say weakly. Yes, you can, she accuses. You just don't want to. I look helplessly at my mother. Her face is choked with pain. Tell her to try to open the bars, she says in a whisper. I can't open the door, I tell my daughter. I can't get through the bars. You try and open the bars. My daughter goes over to the bar door that leads to the visiting room. She pulls and she pushes, she yanks and she hits and she kicks the bars until she falls on the floor in a heap of exhaustion. I go over and pick her up. I hold and rock and kiss her. There is a look of resignation on her face that I can't stand. We spend the rest of the visit talking and playing quietly on the floor. When the guard says the visit is over, I cling to her for dear life. She holds her head high and her back straight, and she walks out of the prison. She waves goodbye at me, her face clouded and worried, looking like a little adult. I go back to my cage and cry until I vomit. I decided that it is time to leave. And that's chapter 20. Very short chapter. Heartbreaking, isn't it? Can't imagine being a parent of a very small child in prison. And that's what Assata went through. Here's a poem that Assata wrote. To my daughter, Kakuya, I have shabby dreams for you of some vague freedom I have never known. Baby, I don't want you hungry or thirsty or out in the cold, and I don't want the frost to kill your fruit before it ripens. I can see a sunny place, life exploding green. I can see your bright bronze skin at ease with all the flowers and the centipedes. I can hear laughter, not groan from ridicule, in words not prompted by ego or greed or jealousy. I see a world where hatred has been replaced by love and me replaced by we. And I can see a world where you, building and exploring, strong and fulfilled, will understand and go beyond my little shabby dreams. Now, moving on to chapter 21. My grandmother came all the way from North Carolina. She came to tell me about her dream. My grandmother had been dreaming all of her life, and her dreams have come true. My grandmother dreams of people passing and babies being born and people being free, but it's never specific. Redbirds sitting on fences, rainbows at sunset, conversations with people long gone. My grandmother's dreams have always come when they were needed and have always meant what they needed them to mean. She dreamed my mother would be a school teacher, my aunt would go to law school, and during the hard times, she dreamed the good times were coming. She told us what we needed to be told and made us believe it like nobody else could have. She did her part. The rest was up to us. We had to make it real. Dreams and realities are opposites. Action synthesizes them. I was extremely pleased that she had come. Her air was confident and victorious. The rest of the family prompted her to tell me her dream. "You're coming home soon," my grandmother told me, catching my eyes and staring down into them. "I don't know when it will be, but you're coming home. You're getting out of here. It won't be too long, though. It'll be much less time than you've already been here." Excited, I asked her to tell me about her dream. We were all talking, I noticed, in a conspiratorial tone. "I dreamed we were in our old house in Jamaica. I don't know if you remember that house or not." I assured her that I did. "I dreamed that I was dressing you," she said. "Putting your clothes on." "Dressing me?" I repeated. "Yes, dressing you." Fear ran up and down my back. Was I little or grown? "You were grown up in my dream." I felt slightly sick. Maybe my grandmother dreamt about my death. Maybe she hadn't dreamt that I was killed or trying to escape. Why else would she be dressing me if I wasn't dead? My grandmother caught my drift of thought. "No, you're all right. You're alive. It was just as plain as the nose on your face. You're coming home. I know what I'm talking about. Don't ask me to explain it anymore because I can't. I just know you're going to come home and that you're going to be all right." I drilled her for more details. She gave me some, she didn't. Finally, after I had asked 1,000 questions, my grandmother let all the authority show in her voice. "I know it will happen because I dreamt it. You're getting out of this place, and I know it. That's all there is to it." Hmm. My grandmother sat looking at me. There was a kind of smile on her face I can't describe. I knew she was serious. My grandmother's dreams were notorious. Her dreams came true. All of her life, her uncanny senses had been like radar, picking up and identifying all kinds of things that we didn't even see. My family and I just sat up there vibing on each other, talking and laughing, bringing up old memories and telling funny stories. Calmness rolled down my body like thick honey. When I got back to my cell, I thought about it all. No amount of scientific, rational thinking could diminish the high that I felt. A tingling, giddy excitement had caught hold of me. I had gotten drunk on my family's arrogant, carefree optimism. I literally danced in my cell, singing, Feet don't fail me now, I sang, the feet part real low. So I guess the guards must have thought I was bugging out, stomping around my cage, singing, feet, feet. You can't win a race just by running, my mother told me when I was little. You have to talk to yourself. Huh? I had asked. You have to talk to yourself when you're running and tell yourself you can win. It had become a habit of sorts. Anytime I'm faced with something difficult or almost impossible, I chant. Over the years, I have developed different kinds of chants, but I always fall back on the old one. I can. I can. Yes, I can. I called my grandparents a day or two before I escaped. I wanted to hear their voices one last time before I went. I was feeling kind of mushy, and so as not to sound suspicious, I told them I wanted to hear some more about the family's history, tracing the ties back to slavery. All too soon, it was time to hang up. Your grandmother was to say something else to you, my grandfather told me. I love you, my grandmother said. We don't want you to get used to that place, do you hear? Don't you let yourself get used to it. No, grandmommy, I won't. Every day out in the street now, I remind myself that Black people in America are oppressed. It's necessary that I do that. People get used to anything. The less you think about your oppression, the more your tolerance for it grows. I'm going to read that sentence again if you have not heard me read this before. The less you think about your oppression, the more your tolerance for it grows. After a while, people just think oppression is the normal state of things. But to become free, you have to be acutely aware of being a slave. That's chapter 21. Interesting, right? Final poem. The tradition. Carried it on now. Carry it on. Carry it on now. Carry it on. Carry on the tradition. There were Black people since the childhood of time who carried it on. In Ghana and Mali and Timbuktu, we carried it on. Carried on the tradition. We hid in the bush when the slave masters came, holding spears. And when the moment was ripe, leaped out and lanced the lifeblood of the would-be masters. We carried it on slave ships, hurling ourselves into oceans, slitting the throats of our captors. We took their whips and their ships. Blood flowed into the Atlantic, and it wasn't all ours. We carried it on, fed Missy arsenic apple pies, stole the axes from the shed, went and chopped off master's head. We ran, we fought, we organized the railroad and underground. We carried it on. In newspapers, in meetings, in arguments, in street fights, we carried it on. In tales told to children, in chants, in cantatas, in poems, in blues songs, in saxophone streams, we carried it on. In classrooms, in churches, in courtrooms, in prisons, we carried it on soapboxes, in picket lines, welfare lines, unemployment lines. We live on the line. We carried it on. In sit-ins and pray-ins and march-ins and die-ins, we carried it on cold Missouri midnights, pitting shotguns against lynch mobs, on burning Brooklyn streets, pitting rocks against rifles. We carried it on against water hoses and bulldogs, against nightsticks and bullets, against tanks and tear gas, needles and nooses, bombs and birth control. We carried it on. In Selma and San Juan, Mozambique, Mississippi, in Brazil, and in Boston, we carried it on through the lies and the sellouts, the mistakes and the madness, through pain and hunger and frustration. We carried it on, carried on the tradition, carried a strong tradition, carried a proud tradition, carried a black tradition, carried it on. Pass it down to the children. Pass it down. Carried it on. Carry it on now. Carry it on to freedom. She has a way with words, doesn't she? This is the last part of the book, the postscript. After this, we're done. Right? All right. Excuse me. I had to wet my whistle. All right, let's go. Postscript. Freedom. I couldn't believe that it had really happened, and the nightmare was over. That finally the dream had come true. I was elated, ecstatic, but I was completely disoriented. Everything was the same, yet everything was different. All of my reactions were super intense. I submerged myself in patterns and textures, sucking in the smells and sounds as if each day was my last. I felt like a voyeur. I forced myself not to stare at people whose conversations I strained to overhear. Suddenly, I was flooded with the horrors of prison and every disgusting experience that somehow I had been able to minimize while inside. I had developed an ability to be patient, calculating, and completely self-controlled. For the most part, I have been incapable of crying. I felt rigid, as though chunks of steel and concrete had worked themselves into my body. I was cold. I strained to touch my softness. I was afraid that prison had made me ugly. My comrades helped a lot. They were so beautiful, natural, and healthy. I loved them for their kindness to me. It had been years since I had communicated with anyone intensely, and I had talked to them almost compulsively. They were like medicine, helping me to ease back into myself again. But I had changed in so many ways. I was no longer the wide-eyed, romantic young revolutionary who believed the revolution was just around the corner. I had still appreciated energetic idealism, but I had long ago become convinced that revolution was a science. Generalities were no longer enough for me. Like my comrades, I believed that a higher level of political sophistication was necessary and that unity in the Black community had to become a priority. We could never afford to forget the lessons we had learned from COINTELPRO. As far as I was concerned, building a sense of national consciousness was one of the most important tasks that lay ahead of us. I couldn't see how we would seriously struggle without having a strong sense of collectivity, without being responsible for each other and to each other. This is one of the points that I think that we need to honestly put in our heads as the left. Assata Shakur knew this, and we should know this too. It was so clear to me that without any truly internationalist component, nationalism was reactionary. There was nothing revolutionary about nationalism by itself. Hitler and Mussolini were nationalists. Any community seriously concerned with its own freedom has to be concerned about other people's freedom as well. So to anybody who's Black in the United States who says, oh, what's going on in Palestine is not our problem, Assata Shakur disagrees with you. When Black people in the United States say what's happening in Congo is not our concern, Assata Shakur disagrees with you. When anybody who says what's happening in Sudan is not a concern, Assata Shakur disagrees with you. In Haiti, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Brazil, in Ukraine, in Russia, China, Vietnam, It does not matter. Anybody that's oppressed, you have to be concerned with it because it means that you have to have an international way of thinking. You have to have people in your hearts and minds, and you have to care for them as if they're your own, because they are. They are your own. Assata Shakur got it. She knew this. This is why it's important for us to be concerned with other people. Our compassion and our kindness will make us concerned with our fellow person. When they hurt, we hurt. When they have joy, we have joy. Don't just give me unity, give me solidarity. That's what it means. That's what Assata Shakur embodied. Beautiful human being that she is. The victory of oppressed people anywhere in the world is a victory for Black people. Each time one of the imperialism's tentacles is cut off, we are closer to liberation. The struggle in South Africa is the most important battle of the century for Black people. The defeat of apartheid in South Africa will bring Africans all over the planet closer to liberation. Imperialism is an international system of exploitation, and we as revolutionaries need to be internationalists to defeat it. Can you hear what she's saying here? Chairman Omali Yeshitela even said the same. Go back and look at my interview with him. We have to be cognizant of what is going on across the world and stand with the oppressed. Because when we stand with the oppressed, then guess what? When we relieve them, when we support them in their relief of oppression, that's one step closer to ending oppression, even for ourselves. Havana, lazy sun against blue-green ocean. A beautiful city of narrow, spiderweb streets on one side of town and broad, tree-lined avenues on the other. Houses with peeling paint and vintage U.S. cars from the 40s and 50s. It's a busy place full of buses, people hurrying, kids in wine or gold-colored uniforms walking leisurely down the street swinging book bags. The first thing that hit me were the open doors. Everywhere you go, doors are open wide. You see people inside their homes, talking, working, or watching television. I was amazed to find that you could actually walk down the streets at night alone. Old people strolling slowly, carrying shopping bags, stop to say, ¿Qué en la mercada? What are they selling in the market? Without a moment's hesitation, they yell at kids to get out of the street. They stand with their hands on their hips, acting like they own the place. I guess they do. They're not afraid. Es mentira, my neighbors exclaim. Is a lie. Que menstrosa tú eres? What a liar you are, my neighbors would ask me what the U.S. is like. And they accuse me of lying when I tell them about the hunger and cold people sleeping in the streets. They refuse to believe me. How can that be in such a rich country? They refuse to believe me. I tell them about drug addicts and child prostitutes, about crime in the streets. They accuse me of exaggerating. We know capitalism is not a good system, but you don't have to exaggerate. Are there really 12-year-old drug addicts? When we tell Cubans about what we go through in this capitalist system, they're shocked and dismayed. Think about that. They're shocked and dismayed. Even though they know about racism and the Ku Klux Klan, about unemployment, such things are unreal to them. Cuba is a country of hope. The reality is so different. I'm amazed at how much Cubans have accomplished in so short of a time since the revolution. There are new buildings everywhere: schools, apartment houses, clinics, hospitals, and daycare centers. They are not like the skyscrapers going up in Midtown Manhattan. There are no exclusive condominiums or luxury office buildings. The new buildings are for the people. Medical care, dental care, and hospital visits are free. Schools at all educational levels are free. Rent is no more than about 10% of salaries. Holy crap. 10 Wait, 10% of your salary? So, wait a minute. If you make $10 an hour, $1 per hour that you make goes towards rent. You make $1,000 a month, you pay $100 in rent. What? What if your rent was only 10% of your income? Cuba! Cuba! Dictatorship. What? Mm. There are no taxes, no income, city, federal, or state taxes. It is so strange to pay the price actually listed on the products without any tax added. Movies, plays, concerts, and sports events all cost 1 or 2 pesos at the most. Museums are free. This is what Ashata Shakur. She literally living in Cuba. She's telling you. This is a Cuba resident. On Saturdays and Sundays, the streets are packed with people dressed up and ready to hang out. I was amazed to discover that such a small island has such rich cultural life and is so lively, particularly when the US press gives just the opposite picture. I'm being introduced at a party. The hostess tells me that the man is from El Salvador. I hold out my hand to shake his. A few seconds too late, I realize he's missing an arm. He asked me what country I'm from. I'm so upset and ashamed, I'm almost shaking. Yo soy de los Estados Unidos, pero no soy Yankee, I tell him. A friend of mine had taught me that phrase. Every time someone asked me where I was from, I cringed. I hated to tell people I was from the US. I had preferred to say I was New African, except that hardly anyone would have understood what that meant. When I read about the death squads in El Salvador or the bombing of hospitals in Nicaragua, I felt like screaming. Too many people in the US support death and destruction without being aware of it. Let's go again. Too many people in the US support death and destruction without being aware of it. How many people are saying that, oh, well, Israel needs to keep bombing until Hamas gives up? Bombing hospitals, schools, mosques, churches, refugee camps. Well, that's the price that they have to pay if they want to get rid of Hamas. Supporting death and destruction. Making excuses for it. They indirectly support the killing of people without even having to look at the corpses. But in Cuba, I could see the results of U.S. foreign policy. Torture victims on crutches who came from other countries to Cuba for treatment, including Namibian children who had survived massacres, and evidence of the vicious aggression the U.S. government had committed against Cuba, including sabotage and numerous assassination attempts against Fidel Castro. Over 600 attempts, by the way. I wondered how all those people in the States who tried to sound tough, saying that the US should go in here, bomb there, take over this, attack that, would feel if they knew that they were indirectly responsible for babies being burned to death. I wonder how they would feel if they were forced to take moral responsibility for that. It sometimes seems that people in the States are so accustomed to watching death on eyewitness news, watching people starve to death in Africa, being tortured to death in Latin America, or shot down in Asian streets, that somehow for them, people across the ocean, people up there or down there or over there, are not real. They're very much real. And people in this country need to realize that. And one of the first questions on the minds of blacks from the States when it comes to Cuba is whether or not racism exists. I was certainly no exception. I had read a little about the history of black people in Cuba and knew that it was very different from the history of black people in the States. Cuban racism had not been as violent or as institutionalized as US racism. And the tradition of two races, blacks and whites, fighting together for liberation, first from colonization and later from dictatorship, was much stronger in Cuba. Cuba's first war for independence began in 1868 when Carlos Manuel de Cespedes freed his slaves from encouraged them to join the army and fight against Spain. One of the most important figures in that war was Antonio Maceo, a black man who was the chief military strategist. Blacks played a crucial role in Cuba's labor movement in the 1950s. Jesus Menendez and Ragazzo Peña led two key unions, and I knew that blacks like Juan Almeida, now Comandante of the Revolution, had played a significant role in the revolutionary struggle to overthrow Batista. But I was most interested in learning what happened to blacks after the triumph of the revolution. I spent my first weeks in Havana walking and watching. Nowhere did I find a segregated neighborhood, but several people told me that I was living. That I'm sorry. Several people told me where I was living had been all white before the revolution. Just from casual observation, it was obvious that race relations in Cuba were different from what they were in the US. Blacks and whites could be seen together everywhere, in cars, walking down streets. Kids of all races played together. I was different. I was definitely different. Whenever I met someone who spoke English, I asked their opinion about the race situation. I want to read this, and this is beautiful. This is a beautiful sentence. Racism is illegal in Cuba, I was told. Many shook their heads and said, Aquí no hay racismo. There is no racism here. Although I heard the same response from everyone, I remained skeptical and suspicious. I couldn't believe it was possible to eliminate hundreds of years of racism just like that in 25 years or so. To me, revolutions were not magical, and no magic wand could be waved to create changes overnight. I'd come to see revolution as a process. I eventually became convinced that the Cuban government was completely committed to eliminating all forms of racism. There was no racist institutions, structures, or organizations, and I understood how the Cuban economic system undermined rather than fed racism. I had assumed that blacks will be working within the revolution to implement the changes and to ensure the continuation of the non-racist policies that Fidel and the revolutionary leaders had instituted in every aspect of Cuban life. A black Cuban friend helped me to have better understanding. He told me that Cubans took their African heritage for granted, that for hundreds of years, Cubans had danced to African rhythms, performed traditional rituals, and worshiped gods like Shango and Ogun. He told me that Fidel, in a speech, had told the people, "We are all Afro-Cubans, from the very lightest to the very darkest." I told him that I thought that it was the duty of Africans everywhere on this planet to struggle to reverse the historical patterns created by slavery and imperialism. Although he agreed with me, he quickly informed me that he didn't think of himself as an African. Yo soy cubano. I am Cuban. And it was obvious he was very proud of being Cuban. He told me the story about a white Cuban who had volunteered twice to fight in Angola. He had received awards for heroism. His case is not at all common in Cuba, but there are some who have problems adjusting to change. What was his problem? I asked. When the guy came home, he caused a big scandal with his family. His daughter wanted to marry a black man, and he opposed the marriage. He said he wanted his grandchildren to look like him. It was a big argument, and his whole family got into it. The guy was so mixed up, he went crazy, and his daughter called him a racist. He wanted to fight everybody. He was out in the street, crying and kicking lampposts. He didn't know what to do. All the time he was in Angola fighting against racism, he had never thought about his own racism. I agree with him that whites fighting against racism had to fight on two levels: against institutionalized racism and against their own racist ideas. What happened to the man? I asked. Well, his daughter got married anyways, and his family convinced him to go to the wedding. Now he babysits for his grandchildren, and he says he's crazy about them. But the guy is still not right in the head. Every time I see him, he's apologetic. I told him I don't want his apologies. Let him apologize to his daughter and her husband. As long as he supports the revolution, I don't care what he thinks. I care more about what he does. If he really supports the revolution, then he's going to change. And even if he never changes, his kids are going to change, and his grandchildren will change even more. That's what I care about. The whole race question in Cuba was even more confusing to me because all the categories of race were different. In the first place, most white Cubans wouldn't even be considered white in the US. They'd be considered Latinos. I was shocked to learn that a lot of Cubans who looked black to me didn't consider themselves black. They called themselves mulattoes, colorados, jobayos, and a whole bunch of other names. It seemed to me that anyone who wasn't jet black was considered a mulatto. The first time someone called me a mulatta, I was so insulted that if I had been able to express myself in Spanish, I would have had a heated argument right there on the spot. Yo no soy una mulatta, yo soy una mujer negra y orgullosa soy una mujer negra. Sorry, my Spanish is horrible. I would tell people as soon as I learned this little Spanish, I'm not a mulatto, but a black woman, and I'm proud to be black. Some people understood where I was coming from, but others thought I was too hung up on the race question. To them, mulatto was just a color, like red, green, or blue. But not to me. It represented a historical relationship. All of my associations with the word mulatto were negative. It represented slavery, slave owners, sexually assaulting. I had to hurt. I can't say the R word. Black women. It represented a privileged caste, educated in European values and cultures. In some Caribbean countries, it represented the middle level of hierarchical three caste system, a caste that acted as a buffer class between the white rulers and the black masses. I found it impossible to separate the word from its history. It reminded me of saying that I heard repeatedly since childhood: if you're white, you're right. If you're black, get back. I realized that in order to really understand the situation, I had to study Cuban history thoroughly. But somehow I felt the mulatto thing hindered Cubans from dealing with some of the negative ideas left over over from slavery and have been very important in helping Black people in the US and in other English speaking countries to view the African heritage in a positive light. I had never heard of any equivalent movement around mulatto pride, and I couldn't the basis for it would be. To me, it was extremely important for all the descendants of Africans everywhere on this planet to struggle to reverse the political, economic, psychological, I'm sorry, and social patterns created by slavery and imperialism. The people of racism takes on so many forms. I'm sorry, the problem of racism takes on so many forms and displays so many subtleties. It's a complicated problem that will require much analysis and much struggle to resolve. Although in some ways, Cubans and I approached the problem from different angles, I felt we shared the same goal: the abolition of racism all over the world. I respected the Cuban government, not only for adopting non racist principles, but for struggling to put those principles into practice. I held my breath as I waited for my aunt to pick up the phone. It had been 5 years since I last spoken to her. 5 years since I had been able to contact my family. Hopefully, she hadn't changed her number. A click, and then at last, I heard her voice. I was so happy. Auntie, I almost shouted. It's me, Assata. Who? Assata. Who? It's me, Assata. I'm in Cuba. I'm in Cuba. Oh, I love you. It's so good to hear your voice. How are you? The voice on the other end was my aunt's, but it was so cold I could hardly believe it. Oh, really? Assata. Hmm. Right. Well, I'm fine. What's the matter, Auntie? It's me, Assata. Are you all right? I'm fine. Auntie? Oh, I missed you so much. It's all right. Everything's okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. How's everybody? How's everybody there? Again, the icy voice. Everything's fine. What do you want? What do I want? What do you mean, what do I want? I want to talk to you. I love you. You sound so cold. Well, I, there was a pause. And then, say something so I know it's really you. Something only you and I know. Finally, understanding. I said the first thing that popped into my head. Auntie, Panty, Jack O'Shanty. It was so. It was a stupid childhood rhyme, and nobody else could possibly know about it. I used to taunt her with it when I was a kid. It is you. Oh my God, it really is you, she screamed. Wait, give me a second to catch my breath. How are you? Fine, I said. How's mommy and Kakuya? Your mother's fine. Oh, she's going to be so happy when I tell her I've talked to you. Kakuya's fine too. Your daughter's so big, you wouldn't recognize her. She's almost as tall as you are. I told her I wanted to call my mother and Kakuya as soon as I finished talking to her. No, you call her tomorrow. Let me call her first so she really knows it's you. Where did you say you are? Cuba. I'm calling from Cuba. I'm a political refugee here. Cuba? My aunt repeated. Cuba? Are you okay there? I mean, are you safe? I think so, I told her. I feel fine. It seems that way. Talking to Kakuya and my mother the next day was like a dream. Hi, this little voice said into the phone. It was the most beautiful voice I'd ever heard. I was nervous and happy, sweating buckets. How are you? I asked my daughter. Fine. I felt like a pot boiling over. All the feelings I kept inside for so long came gushing out. I had a million things I wanted to ask her, a million things I wanted to say. My mother and I made plans. She and my aunt and Kakuya would come down as soon as possible. It seemed too good to be true. And it was. Month after month passed by. In order for Kakuya to get her passport, she needed a birth certificate. My mother told me that for 10 years, Elmhurst Hospital had refused to issue Kakuya a birth certificate. Finally, after months of hassling, Evelyn had to go to court to get document proving that my daughter had been born. Over the months had passed. I began to understand the kind of hell that the police and the FBI had put my family through. After I had escaped, the police had so persistently and brutally badgered my mother that she had a heart attack. What they had done to Evelyn was beyond belief. I understood why Evelyn had reacted to my call the way she did. At one time, Evelyn's office telephone had 10 intercepts on it. She and my mother had received phony notes in my handwriting. They received telephone calls with my voice telling them to come to the spot and bring some money. They had found electric eyes and all kinds of other devices in and around their houses. They had experienced strange break ins where nothing of value was taken, but they had survived and grown stronger in the process. As the plane swooped down over in Havana, it seemed that my heart was beating on my ribs to get out. My stomach hurt. My mouth was dry like cotton. It seemed like a million people poured off the plane before a tall little girl with great big eyes started down the ramp. I could see my mother looking frail, yet so determined, with my aunt behind her looking triumphant. How much we had all gone through. Our fight had started on a slave ship years before we were born. Venceremos, my favorite word in Spanish, crossed my mind. 10 million people had stood up to the monster. 10 million people only 90 miles away. We were here together in their land, my small little family, holding each other after so long. There was no doubt about it. Our people would one day be free. The cowboys and bandits didn't own the world. The end. It's done. It's done. I'm finished with the book. Assata Shakur's autobiography. What a book, man. If those of you who have been following this channel and following my readings, thank you guys so very much for being along with me for this journey, for reading this book. I am so happy I got through it. This was awesome. So yeah, I'm so excited. Aren't you guys excited too? Man, if you guys haven't picked up that book, go ahead and pick it up, give it a read. I think Assata Shakur is still alive. She's still in Cuba. I would love to be able to talk to her one day. Oh my gosh. I think that would be amazing. But yes, I am super excited. Did you guys like the stream? If you guys have not, go ahead and give a like. Just as if you guys have not, you guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com, for email notifications so that you guys are aware of whenever I go live. So thank you so very much for that. Also, I would like to thank all the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, and anybody that sends me anything through PayPal. Thank you to all new patrons, every single one of you. And just want to give you guys a quick shout out as well. And I'll be updating this as soon as I can get a chance. So thank you so very much to all the patrons on Patreon. And also, if you guys would like to be patrons on Patreon, let's go ahead and take a look at the tiers so that you guys know what's what, so you guys are aware. Then you guys can go to either JB Members, Solidarity, Comrade, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters. So thank you so very much. And yes, I am demonetized. So if you guys would like to, you guys can support the channel through Patreon or PayPal. I'm also doing a fundraiser for Orlando Mutual Aid. You guys can donate via Cash App at $OrlandoRBN. We're still raising money for grocery, gift cards, toiletries, and warm clothes. So thank you so very much to everybody for donating so far. And it is very much appreciated because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build mutual aid for our neighbors in this country. So I'm going to go to the chat really quick just to say hello to all my peeps, and then we'll adjourn. So, man, I'm excited. This is so cool. All right, let me share the screen. I'm gonna start off with Rockfin first. Man, I'm so excited. I'm so happy that I was actually able to get that I was actually able to do this. Thank you so very much, Hempcar. He says, I'm glad Assata was revolutionary. I have no comrades and already outed myself, and there is more surveillance today. So nonviolence really is the only path I can see forward unless billionaires prop up a fake NED color revolution, cowboys and bandits. Okay. Thank you so very much, Hempcar. Good to see you as well in the chat. Let's go to the Chizat, and I said Chizat again. All right. Raziel the Great says, if you can see a heart on your screen, please press it. YouTube algos appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Appreciate that as well. Sean Miller says, I was a 12-year-old drug addict. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. Yeah, a lot of people have to self-medicate because of the trauma and a lot of the things that we go through within this system, you know. So yeah. All right. Oh, thank you so much, Sean Miller. Sean Miller says, I just want to say I love you all. Thank you for being you. You make the world a better place. Yes, all of you do. Definitely. Thank you so very much. Yes, that's one thing I love about the community that we're building here. Jacqueline says, thank you, Sean. That chat is so friendly and inclusive. Wouldn't the world be a better place if everyone was like that? I agree. I definitely agree. I wish the world was more like all of you guys. So thank you. Oh, this is so beautiful, Sean. I'm on cloud nine right now. My great grandfather told me that I am the man he wishes he could have been. Oh, what a compliment, man. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to assume your gender. But what a compliment. Ah, that is so cool. Mm. Dwayne says mulatto is what they call people of African and European origin. Yeah. Dwayne says my Spanish is not bad. That's only because I live in an area where there's a lot of Latinos. I try to be more better in my pronunciation when it comes to Spanish because you know I feel it's respectful and it's more clear in understanding. I could say hola como estas, también y tú. I'm not gonna do that with the American accent. Jacqueline says it must have been heartbreaking for Assata to be separated from her daughter so long. Yeah. I had to wait to finish this chat to see if there was a happy family reunion. And yes, definitely. Dwayne, you ain't saying nothing but a word. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth says, so good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Jacqueline says, I'm going to have to listen to the playlist from the beginning because I missed so much of it. I'm glad it had a positive ending after all the pain and suffering. Yes, definitely. I am just, yeah. Oh, thank you so very much, Cowboy Kitty. That means a lot. Appreciate it. I'm going to check on Rumble, see if there's anybody in the chat. Okay, there's, all right, nobody in the chat right now. That's cool. All right. Well, so I gotta think of another book to read. I was thinking maybe bell hooks. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of another. I'm trying to stick with a woman, um, so that I can, because I don't want to, you know, as much as I love men, you know what I'm saying? I want to make sure that I get a woman, a female revolutionary perspective when I do my readings. So I'm going to try to read, trying to figure out which book I'll be reading next. So I'll be trying to get into that. So, but yes, I'll be getting into Laziness Does Not Exist next reading. So I'll be doing that. So be sure to stay tuned for that one. We'll be continuing chapter 5 in this book. So I am excited. So we'll be getting into that. And yes, and then also I will be having Hillary Agro next Tuesday. So she is an anthropologist as well as she is an expert on drugs. So we're just going to be an interesting conversation. So I cannot wait to have her on. So be here, or be square at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. So it's going to be a great conversation. So if you guys, if nothing else, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who has been in the chat and supporting the channel. Did I miss anybody? If I missed anybody in the chat, just to say hi to, my apologies. Let me just give one look through before. Michelle, good to see you. Bonjour. So yeah, she says hi everyone. Good to see you, Michelle. All right. I think I got all the way to the top. All right. Cool beans, jelly bean. All right. All right. So let me see. Yeah, I'm gonna head out, but I want to thank you all for watching. Look, like I always say, water your plants and water yourselves. Leave the world better than you found them. Reading is fundamental because that's important too. Whether you read with your own eyes or you just listen to an audiobook or listen to somebody like me who just reads, go ahead and do whatever you need to get the books in. But as long as you do that reading. So, thank you so very much. You guys have yourself a beautiful, beautiful evening. Shout out to all the indigenous people around the world, especially the indigenous people here in the United States, the indigenous people in Africa, the indigenous people in Palestine. Free Palestine, by the way. Free Congo, Sudan, Haiti, Hawaii, Samoa, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. Mwah! Forehead kisses to all of you. Have a good night.